The days are finally cool, crisp, and windy, and it's the perfect season to snuggle up and enjoy some simple, cozy October homemaking. Fall is filled with fun activities because we can finally get outside and enjoy the weather. But no matter what, I always find that the coziest and the sweetest memories are made at home. Creating a cozy fall home doesn't have to be complicated. I add a touch of amber hued tones here and there. I swap out my summery arrangements with dried flowers or grasses. And mostly what I like to do is add in touches of coziness into the things I am already doing, like cooking, for example. I am making a sourdough pumpkin prosciutto focaccia. And what I really like about making this focaccia is that it is a 1-day recipe and it doesn't require any kneading or any stretch and folds, but it really harnesses in a lot of those fall flavors. So here I am just adding about 3 3/4 cups of flour into a bowl. I did not feel like converting my original yeast recipe for this into grams, and focaccia is pretty forgiving, so I am just using regular old cup measurements here. And then about a half a cup of sourdough starter straight out of the fridge, unfed, which makes it even easier. 3/4 cups of water and a cup of canned pumpkin. Now, if you have leftover canned pumpkin, I will show you in a few minutes something really fun you can do with that leftover pumpkin. And now I am just mixing this together. I tried using my Danish dough whisk, but the shape of that bowl made it a huge mess. So sometimes you just got to get your hands right in there and mix the ingredients together. And all I'm doing is mixing this until it is mostly combined and letting it sit for 30 minutes. When you first mix the ingredients, that dough is pretty sticky, so don't let that alarm you. That is normal for focaccia. But now after 30 minutes, you can see it is much less sticky and I can really handle it without it sticking to my hands too much. And what is really awesome about this recipe is now I'm just shaping it into a ball and I'm setting it aside to bulk ferment for the day. I am using my Brood & Taylor proofing box so I can set the temperature to 81 degrees. I really want to have this ready for dinner time, so I just want to make sure that it's bulk fermented and ready to go. But you could also just let this sit at room temperature overnight until it is doubled and domed. I'll get back to the bread later in the video, but I first want to show you one of my favorite ways to cozy up at home. This fall, I have really been enjoying creating simmer pots. And if you have not tried a simmer pot, I cannot recommend this enough. So it is simply just a combination of ingredients that you boil on the stove to create a really beautiful aroma that fills your entire home. Before I forget, I do want to mention that this super cozy and cute sweater that I am wearing, I got from a boutique called Flip Drip. I found them at a local fall festival and I got this sweater, which is perfect for fall days at home because it's light but also cozy. I will leave a link to their information in the description box below. This simmer pot is a perfect way to use up your leftover pumpkin. So I am mixing about a half a cup of pumpkin, 1 sliced apple, 4 cinnamon sticks, a tablespoon of vanilla, a tablespoon of cloves, and a tablespoon of pumpkin spice into a large Dutch oven. Then I filled about 3/4 full. The thing with the simmer pot is you can use a smaller pot and it'll condense that smell a little bit more, but I like to fill it a lot so that way I don't have to worry about refilling it throughout the day quite as frequently. Just bring this to a low boil, then drop it to a simmer, and then enjoy it all day, adding water as needed. You can grab this simmer pot recipe as well as a freebie download with 3 other simmer pot recipes over on my blog at moonandmagnolia.com. I will leave a link for that in the description box. A simmer pot is such a simple and lovely way to add coziness and warmth to your home. It smells like a pie your grandma would be making, but it's just a simple pot on your stove. Fall is my favorite time to be in the kitchen. I have a much more relaxed disposition in the kitchen this time of year. I don't know if it's just the darker days or if it's because we're spending more time at home, but I really love being in the kitchen. But we still have busy schedules, so I don't always have time for super complex recipes. So what I am doing today for lunch is I am making a warm chili mac recipe. This is really great because my 3-year-old will eat it. My husband and I both like it, but it still has that sense of coziness. So I am simply just cooking some ground beef and onion in a cast iron Dutch oven. And then when that is mostly cooked through, I am adding in a little bit of garlic powder, some cumin and paprika and chili powder. And then I'm just cooking that until it is aromatic and adding in 3 cups of water and a spoonful of beef bouillon. I would have preferred to use beef broth, but I did not have any, but you could definitely use that. I'm also adding in a can of tomatoes. These are home canned tomatoes that I canned early in the summer. You may have seen that video on YouTube when I canned a year's worth of tomatoes. So I'm putting that in there. I'm also adding in a can of pinto beans and a full box of macaroni noodles. Now this isn't super fancy, but those spices and a simmering pot on the stove definitely cultivates a lot of cozy fall feelings. And I really want to emphasize that to create coziness and simplicity in your home should not be complicated. It's small changes here and there, adding in fall spices, making something warm instead of a cold sandwich. Those are the things that can create coziness without adding in extra work into your day. With one pot noodle dishes like this, I found that if you cook the noodles until they're al dente, that works pretty well because they will still soak up some of that moisture. So I cooked them until they were almost finished. And then I added in some shredded cheddar cheese and I topped this with fresh cilantro and it was so good. This was a super easy weekday lunch and we had leftovers for the next day. And with that next to the simmer pot, it really warmed up our home. I have been on a sheet pan dinner kick lately. I cannot get enough of them. I tend to go in and out with these sorts of things. And right now I am on the sheet pan meal train. So today for dinner, I am making a fall harvest vegetable sheet pan meal. And I am using a chicken that I had cooked earlier in the week. So recently I've also been really into spatchcocking a chicken, which is where you cut the spine out and flatten it on a sheet. It cooks way more evenly, and I have found that it might actually be the best way to cook a whole chicken. So I have the chicken, which I'll get to in a minute, and right now I am just peeling and chopping up some sweet potatoes and quartering some Brussels sprouts, and then I found half of an onion in the fridge and I'm simply just slicing that up. These are going right onto a preheated stone baking sheet and I'm roasting them for about 20 minutes at 425, hitting them with a little bit of olive oil, salt, pepper, cumin, and paprika before they go in. You could definitely make this with any of your favorite fall vegetables. I think this would be really great with regular potatoes. I often like to roast beets, and I think if I were to do this one again, I would even chop up a few apples and put it in there for a touch of sweetness, but really you can't go wrong with this. A few days ago, I spatchcocked 2 chickens and roasted them on a baking sheet, and that worked out really well because now we have all this leftover chicken and eventually all those bones that I can boil into a broth. So I just picked some meat off of the chicken and I am adding it to the vegetables once they come out of the oven. At this point, they are mostly cooked through. The potatoes are still just a little bit firm on the inside, but that's what I want because this will go back into the oven again for a few minutes. So I stir up the vegetables, I'm putting the chicken on top, and then I'm adding some pumpkin seeds to this and a pretty big handful of craisins. The sweetness in this was really good. That's why I actually think apples in here would also be really good. And then I'm giving it a stir and putting it back in just until that chicken is warm through and the vegetables are completely cooked. Once it comes out, I'm then topping it with some Parmesan cheese and then back into the oven it goes just until that cheese is melty and delicious. This was so easy and healthy and delicious, and all those flavors together in one forkful really tasted like autumn. Okay, let's get back to this really delicious fall sourdough pumpkin prosciutto focaccia. So this was in the proofing box for I'd say about 5.5 to 6 hours, and you can see it is doubled and domed on top. So first I am preparing a baking sheet and putting some olive oil on it. Just so you know, I was not paying attention and I put way too much olive oil on there. You really only need about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. I am turning the dough out onto that oiled baking sheet, and I think this is a 10 by 15 baking sheet, so it's pretty big. And I'm using my hands to gently just shape the dough into a rectangle. On a baking sheet this size, the dough probably won't be big enough to fill up the entire sheet, but that is okay. And then I'm covering this in plastic and setting it aside for about an hour and a half or 2 hours for a second rise. I put it on top of my proofing box so that way it would stay a little bit warmer and hopefully rise faster. But the second rise isn't quite as particular as the first when it comes to focaccia. In the meantime, I am slicing up some prosciutto, and then when this is puffy, I am getting ready to bake it. So you can see it is puffy. I think technically I could have let it do a second rise a little longer, but this is so forgiving, it does not matter. I am brushing it with some olive oil and then adding a little bit of thyme. This would also be really good with fresh rosemary if you have any. And I am sprinkling it pretty generously with some Parmesan cheese, and I'm adding on some salted pumpkin seeds and prosciutto. You can really put anything you want on this, and I will say the more toppings, the merrier when it comes to a focaccia like this. Now, traditionally, you would use your fingertips to poke the dough before topping it, but I like to do it after topping it just so it kind of mushes those toppings down into the dough. Somewhere along the lines, I heard that dimpling the dough like that allows little pockets for the oil to get into to make it nice and crispy and delicious, but either way, you will be totally fine. This then bakes for 20 minutes at 400 degrees. Truly, I think this is one of the easiest breads you can make because it requires almost nothing. No kneading, no mixing, no stretch and folds. You can have it done by dinner time. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, I made this with inactive starter straight out of the fridge. And this was such a cozy and delicious weeknight bread. I hope this video has offered a few ideas and inspiration for cultivating coziness in your home this fall, and I hope you and your family are having the most beautiful autumn. Thank you so much for stopping by today, and I'll see you again next time.